States don't act on love, they act on fear. Greenland isn't about identity or culture, it's about geography, military access, and control of the Arctic as global competition heats up. When great powers feel vulnerable, rules become flexible and allies become instruments. This isn't betrayal, it's realism. The strong do what they can, the weak endure what they must. Power overrides alliance loyalty because alliances are not built on friendship, but on convenience. And convenience lasts only as long as interests align. States do not wake up each morning asking how to be loyal. They wake up asking how to survive. When survival feels threatened, loyalty becomes a luxury. History shows this pattern again and again. Allies cooperate when they gain from it and compete when they must. The language of shared values is useful for speeches, but it is power that decides policy. When a strong state sees a strategic advantage slipping away, it does not stop and ask whether its partners will feel offended. It asks whether delay will make it weaker tomorrow. Alliances exist to manage fear, not to eliminate it. The moment fear rises, discipline inside alliances weakens. That is why strong states often pressure weaker partners, even inside the same alliance. They do not see it as betrayal, they see it as necessity. Moral language is flexible, but geography and power are not. When vital interests are involved, military access, resources, strategic positioning, no treaty is sacred enough to stop pressure from building. Weak allies depend on protection, and strong allies know it. That imbalance creates quiet coercion, even when everyone pretends it is cooperation. Loyalty works best when power is balanced. When power is unequal, loyalty becomes conditional. The strong expect obedience and the weak hope for restraint, but hope is not a strategy. Great powers think in terms of risk and opportunity, not fairness. If protecting an ally threatens their own security, they will reinterpret their commitments. If controlling a region gives them an advantage over rivals, they will find reasons to justify it, even if it embarrasses their partners. Alliances are tools, not families. Tools are used, not loved. When a tool no longer fits the job, it is reshaped or replaced. This is why founding members often dominate younger or weaker members. They believe seniority gives them authority. They believe their sacrifices in the past earn them freedom of action in the present. And because they usually provide most of the military power, they feel entitled to lead, even if leadership starts to look like pressure. Smaller allies talk about equality, bigger allies talk about responsibility, but responsibility is often just another word for control. When crises appear, consultation shrinks and decisions centralize. The powerful act first and explain later. They expect others to adapt. That is not cruelty, it is logic in a dangerous world. In international politics, intentions matter less than capabilities. A friendly, weak state is less valuable than a strategically placed one. When geography matters more than friendship, friendship loses. Leaders may feel uncomfortable about this, but discomfort does not change reality. They are judged not by how loyal they are, but by how safe they keep their own people. If loyalty threatens safety, loyalty will be redefined. This is why alliances are always fragile beneath the surface. They look solid in calm times and tense in dangerous ones. When threats grow, unity becomes harder, not easier. Every state starts calculating again. Who benefits? Who loses? Who controls what? These questions replace speeches about unity. Even shared enemies do not guarantee harmony. Allies often disagree more with each other than with their rivals about how to respond. And when disagreement turns into risk, power decides the outcome. The strong push, the weak adjust. That is not because the strong are evil, but because the system rewards strength and punishes hesitation. States that ignore power politics do not become noble, they become vulnerable. And vulnerable states do not survive long enough to keep their promises. So loyalty in alliances is real, but it is shallow compared to fear. It lasts while it is useful. It fades when it is costly. Every treaty is written in ink but enforced by power. When power shifts, interpretation shifts. What once looked like cooperation begins to look like pressure. What once sounded like partnership begins to sound like command. And yet everyone keeps using the language of unity because admitting the truth would make the system look what it really is, a world where security comes before sentiment and survival comes before solidarity. Geography drives strategy because space shapes fear, opportunity, and limitation long before ideology or ambition enters the picture. And every state, whether it admits it or not, is trapped by the land and water around it. Mountains block movement, oceans protect and isolate, rivers invite trade and invasion, and climate decides what can be grown, built, or defended. Leaders may talk about values, but generals look at maps, and maps tell them what is possible and what is dangerous. A country surrounded by water thinks differently from one surrounded by enemies, and a nation with open plains thinks differently from one protected by mountains. These physical facts do not change with elections or speeches, and that is why strategy tends to repeat itself across centuries, even when governments change. Russia fears invasion from the West because history taught it that flat land invites armies. Britain relied on its navy because water made ships more useful than soldiers. The United States looks outward because two oceans give it safety at home. These are not choices, they are consequences of location. Geography sets the problems that strategy tries to solve. States do not pick their neighbors, and they cannot move their borders at will, so they must learn to live with their surroundings or try to control them. When a country sits near a choke point, a narrow sea lane, a mountain pass, or a vital strait, it becomes important whether it wants to or not. Power flows through space, and whoever controls key spaces gains leverage over others. That is why empires always fight over crossroads, coastlines, and corridors. Trade, armies, and influence move more easily through some places than others, and strategy is about mastering those pathways. Climate also matters because it affects logistics, endurance, and population. Cold regions require different planning than hot ones. Harsh environments make control expensive, while fertile ones attract competition. Strategy grows from these realities. Leaders might dream of expansion or peace, but geography tells them how hard each option will be. Even technology does not erase geography, it only changes how it matters. Airplanes, missiles, and satellites reduce distance, but they do not remove the value of bases, islands, ports, and terrain. A missile still needs a place to be launched from, a ship still needs a harbor, and soldiers still need land to stand on. Technology stretches geography but does not defeat it. That is why islands remain valuable, why narrow seas remain tense, and why borders remain sensitive. Strategy is always about managing vulnerability, and vulnerability comes from space. A long border is harder to defend than a short one. Open land is harder to secure than rough terrain. Access to the sea brings trade but also threat. Every advantage carries a risk, and strategy is the art of balancing those risks. Countries with secure geography can afford patience. Those with exposed geography live with anxiety. Anxiety pushes action. When leaders feel boxed in by their surroundings, they seek buffers, allies, or control over nearby regions. They call it security, but it is really about changing the map in their favor. When they cannot change it, they adapt to it. Small states near big ones learn caution. Big states near rivals learn suspicion. Neutrality is easier when geography protects you. It is harder when geography exposes you. This is why some countries can stay out of conflicts while others are dragged into them. The land itself chooses for them. Strategy also reflects access. States that can reach the world by sea think globally. States that are landlocked think regionally. Trade routes shape interests, and interests shape policy. If your economy depends on shipping lanes, you care about distant waters. If it depends on pipelines or roads, you care about neighboring land. Geography decides what you must defend and what you can ignore. It also shapes identity over time. People grow used to seeing certain directions as dangerous and others as safe. Those habits turn into tradition, and tradition turns into doctrine. Armies train for the terrain they expect to fight on. Navies grow where water invites them. Air power grows where distance demands it. Strategy becomes memory written in plans. Even when new leaders arrive, they inherit old fears because the land that created those fears is still there. That is why some rivalries never die. As long as geography keeps two powers close, suspicious, or competing over the same space, their conflict remains possible. Peace requires more than good intentions. It requires space that allows trust. Where space is tight, trust is fragile. Geography also explains why moral language often sounds hollow. States talk about rights and law, but they act when their position in space feels threatened. If a hostile force moves closer to their borders, they react regardless of speeches. They may justify it with values, but the trigger is distance. How close is the threat? How fast can it arrive? And how hard is it to stop? Strategy is not poetry. It is calculation rooted in space. Even alliances follow geography. Countries ally most easily with those who share borders or seas because they share dangers. Distance makes commitment weaker because distance makes sacrifice harder. You care more about what happens next door than what happens far away. Geography sets priorities. It tells leaders where to look first, what to fear most, and what to defend at all costs. When crises happen, leaders do not ask what is fair. They ask what is near, what is vital, and what is vulnerable. That is geography speaking through strategy. And as long as the earth has shape, as long as land and water divide and connect us, strategy will always be a story written by geography, with politics merely adding the words. Arctic equals future dominance because the region is no longer a frozen wasteland at the edge of the world, but a strategic center where power, resources, and military reach are slowly converging, and as the ice melts, competition heats up. For centuries, the Arctic was protected by nature itself, too cold, too remote, too expensive to control, but technology and climate have changed the rules, turning what was once inaccessible into a new frontier of rivalry. The Arctic holds vast reserves of oil, gas, rare minerals, and fisheries, and in a world where resources mean influence, whoever controls access to them controls leverage over others. Energy shapes power, and power shapes politics. So the race for Arctic resources is not about curiosity, it is about control over the foundations of modern economies. But resources are only part of the story. The Arctic is also about movement. As ice retreats, new shipping routes open, cutting travel time between major markets in Asia, Europe, and North America. Shorter routes mean cheaper trade, faster supply chains, and strategic advantages for those who can secure and regulate these paths. Control of these routes means influence over global commerce, and influence over commerce translates into political power. States that dominate Arctic sea lanes will shape trade rules, collect fees, and gain leverage in negotiations. This is why major powers are investing heavily in Arctic ports, icebreakers, satellites, and infrastructure. They are not doing it for prestige. They are doing it because they see the future map of power shifting northward. Military strategy follows the same logic. The Arctic offers new positions for submarines, missile systems, radar stations, and air bases. From the Arctic, forces can reach deep into rival territory faster than from many traditional bases. In a world of long-range missiles and rapid response forces, proximity matters, and the Arctic shortens distances between major powers. That makes it a perfect place for surveillance, deterrence, and first strike capabilities. Whoever dominates the Arctic gains an advantage in early warning systems and rapid deployment. This changes the balance of power. It makes some states feel safer and others feel more exposed. Exposure creates fear, and fear drives competition. The Arctic is becoming a chessboard where each move is watched closely because every base, every patrol, every satellite launch changes the strategic picture. Control of the Arctic is also about law and legitimacy. As states push north, they argue over territorial claims, continental shelves, and exclusive economic zones. These legal battles are not abstract. They decide who can drill, fish, build, and patrol. Law becomes another weapon in the struggle for dominance. States use treaties, commissions, and courts to lock in advantages, but when law fails, power speaks louder. If a state can enforce its claims with ships, planes, and soldiers, its interpretation of the law becomes more convincing. This is how dominance is built, not just through words, but through presence. Presence creates facts on the ground, or in this case, on the ice and sea. Once facts exist, others must react to them. Reaction is weaker than action. The one who moves first shapes the game. Arctic dominance also carries symbolic power. It signals technological strength, endurance, and ambition. Operating in extreme conditions requires advanced technology, logistics, and training. States that succeed there show the world they can operate anywhere. That reputation itself becomes power because it deters rivals and attracts partners. Smaller states look for protection, and they align with those who seem capable of defending harsh frontiers. So Arctic success is not only regional, it affects global perception of strength. Dominance in the Arctic means being seen as a serious global power. It means having a seat at the table when future rules are written. It also means being able to deny others access, which is one of the strongest forms of power. You do not have to conquer the world, you only have to control the doors. The Arctic is becoming one of those doors. Climate change accelerates this process. As ice melts faster, opportunities appear faster. This creates urgency. States do not want to be late to a game where early moves decide long-term outcomes. That is why we see rapid militarization, infrastructure building, and diplomatic activity in the North. Everyone knows that once routes, bases, and claims are established, they are hard to reverse. The future will belong to those who prepare for it now. Waiting means losing influence later. The Arctic also connects to nuclear strategy. Many nuclear submarines already operate under Arctic waters because ice provides cover. Control of Arctic seas affects second strike capability, which is the heart of nuclear deterrence. If one side can track or threaten the other's submarines, it gains a massive strategic advantage. That makes the Arctic central to global security, not peripheral. What happens there affects calculations in capitals thousands of miles away. Leaders think about the Arctic when they think about war and peace because the Arctic affects who can strike, who can defend, and who can survive a conflict. This is why Arctic dominance is not a regional issue, but a global one. It shapes how secure or insecure major powers feel. And insecurity is dangerous. It pushes states to take risks, build weapons, and form rival blocs. As competition grows, cooperation becomes harder. The Arctic, once imagined as a zone of peace, now looks like a zone of testing. Can powers share it, or will they fight over it? History suggests that when something becomes valuable, it becomes contested. And when it becomes contested, it becomes militarized. Dominance does not always mean direct control over every inch of territory. It means shaping outcomes, setting limits, and forcing others to react to you. In the Arctic, dominance means deciding who gets access, who feels safe, and who feels threatened. It means being able to protect your own interests while influencing the behavior of others. That is real power. The future world will not be decided only in capitals or battlefields we already know. It will also be decided in places that used to be ignored. The Arctic is one of those places. As ice disappears, the illusion of remoteness disappears with it. What remains is a new arena where strength, technology, and ambition collide. In that arena, those who command space, resources, and movement will command influence. That is why the Arctic is not just about cold and ice, it is about who leads, who follows, and who decides the rules of tomorrow.